He saw nothing. He had no knife or sharp instrument. The window grating was of iron, but he had too often assured himself of its solidity. All his furniture consisted of a bed, a chair, a table, a pail, and a jug. The bed had iron clamps, but they were screwed to the wood, and it would have required a screwdriver to take them off. The table and chair had nothing. The pail had once possessed a handle, but that had been removed. Dante had but one resource, which was to break the jug, and with one of the sharp fragments attack the wall. He let the jug fall on the floor and broke it in pieces. Dante concealed 2 or 3 of the sharpest fragments in his bed, leaving the rest on the floor. The breaking of his jug was too natural an accident to excite suspicion. Dante had all night to work in, but in the darkness he could not do much, and soon he felt that he was working against something very hard. He pushed back his bed and waited for day. All night he heard subterranean workmen, who continued to mine his way. Day came, the jailer entered. Dante told him that the jug had fallen from his hands while he was drinking, and the jailer went grumbly to fetch another, without giving himself the trouble to remove the fragments of the broken one. He returned speedily and advised the prisoner to be more careful, and departed. Dante heard joyfully the key grate in the lock. He listened until the sound of steps died away, and then, hastily displacing his bed, saw by the faint light that penetrated into his cell that he had labored uselessly at the previous evening in attacking the stone instead of removing the plaster that surrounded it. The damp had rendered it friable, and Dante was able to break it off. In small morsels, it is true, but at the end of half an hour he had scraped off a handful. A mathematician might have calculated that in 2 years, supposing that the rock was not encountered, a passage of 20 feet long and 2 feet broad might be formed. Dante here just exhibiting his ingenuity and smartness. He recognizes he has limited energy. Energy is a resource, and therefore he can't see what he's doing at nighttime, decides to continue in the daytime, and looking around his cell for what he can use to do this. Doesn't mention what the jug is made of. I'm assuming it's a ceramic or maybe a glass. If it, falls and breaks. Certainly it wasn't plastic at the time, and metal doesn't shatter. So one of those two things. But also, I guess this would have been more known to people at the time, but Dumas has also mentioned that the kind of mortar around the stones is still damp. This isn't the kind of poured concrete that we know today, or the poured mortar that surrounds brick and stuff these days. So while that could still be chiselable, is that a word, chiselable? This is more damp and I think gives a little bit more to something like ceramic or glass, which would just normally scrape against these things, which is why when he recognizes that he was doing it to just the rock the night before, he stops and recalibrates. But let's get back to the Scarlet Pimpernel. I picked this one up because it was, a kind of known adventure story, swashbuckling with political intrigue and, related to the French Revolution, as we talked about last episode. Now, here's the thing about Baroness Orczy. I'm not an expert on her, as we well established. I'm not an expert on anything. I'm just reporting my Cliff Notes version of what I've learned. She was a aristocrat herself, had experienced turmoil in, I think it was Hungary, where she was from, and she was whisked away to safety to England. Now, she writes the Scarlet Pimpernel as this character who sneaks from England into France to save people from the guillotine. Now, sure, on the surface, that sounds like good swashbuckling fun. And I have to admit, it is a page-turner. It's well-written, it's energetic, it's pithy, and just a good, fun read. However, when you stop and think for more than 2 seconds, what stories are actually being conveyed here, the meanings of those stories, Baroness Orczy, being an aristocrat herself, she writes the Scarlet Pimpernel as an Englishman who plays dumb during the day, and then kind of moonlights as this masked vigilante character called the Scarlet Pimpernel. He is the one that sneaks into French lines and whisks away other aristocrats and royalty who are about to be taken by the guillotine. I mean, just pause and consider the political calculations of that. Basically, it's, one really rich one percenter going in and saving the lives of other rich one percenters from the hands of the people who they oppressed for their entire lives. And it's written without any kind of political nuance whatsoever. The people who are engaging in the terror, both for entertainment purposes, but also like putting people under the blade, they're monsters. They are just bloodthirsty. I don't even want to use the words. I mean, she doesn't use the words, but like the words we hear in the news now by certain people to describe large populations and communities of people, to dehumanize them. That's essentially what they're saying of, the people who had experienced such financial and economic downturn. They're just monsters. They're just monsters who want to take the lives of the aristocrats. And how dare they? I'm not advocating for a French Revolution terror era, but I'm just saying the broad political strokes that she writes the story with is a little bit hard to take in 2025. You have to do a lot of mental preparation to be able to just set it aside and look at it as a fantasy story. But the most important thing of it, and I don't know how much this is true, and I'm going to avoid going into too much of my own personal interests here, but the Scarlet Pimpernel is the name of the vigilante that is the name of the quote-unquote hero that the Englishman takes on when he goes and saves all these people. And by day, he is this kind of, he plays this dim-witted aristocrat. And it is pointed to this story as being the first time that there is a masked hero that has a secret identity. I don't think that's exactly true. And I get a little rankled by broad history attributions like this. And if I could just make a quick comparison to horror films, specifically slasher films. I love a good slasher film. I have studied the slasher film history, and everyone points to Halloween as the first authentic slasher film. And there's nuance here that is completely lost, because there are elements to the slasher film that I think come before Halloween. You look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you look at Black Christmas, and all of those things are there. The whodunit, the body count structure of the story, one character dying after another until there's one left over, and there being a masked or unseen villain doing it all, and the kind of unknowable nature of them. So you have that in many films leading up to Halloween, but Halloween's the one that brings them all together into a cohesive piece. Sure, okay. So the Scarlet Pimpernel is perhaps the Halloween of the masked vigilante trope. But the nuance is, like, I think there's a book like The Black Tulip, which I've mentioned a number of times, by Dumas, that came many, many years, decades before the Scarlet Pimpernel. And should we just draw attention to the fact that the Black Tulip, the Scarlet Pimpernel are both the color flower naming titles? Like, she had to know, right, when she wrote this book, with zero reference or homage to Dumas in it. I'm not being protective of Dumas, but I'm just saying, like, let's just open our minds a bit to, being able to cleanly identify and attribute status to a specific piece for achieving something. But anyway, in the Black Tulip, there is a man, kind of Robin Hood style, or Robin Hood itself is a good example, where in a different era of political intrigue and stuff, the Black Tulip is a masked character who goes and fights against the system, much like the Scarlet Pimpernel does. So, like, it might not be the exact trope that is set up that would eventually become Batman or whatever. It's part of the spectrum. And I get kind of rankled when we don't look at things on the spectrum. We look at them as, this is the one thing in a single blinder window, and therefore we need to hold this one thing up as the example, especially when you have something like the Scarlet Pimpernel, which is so problematic when you look at it through a modern lens. So It's easier to take the Scarlet Pimpernel's politics when you look at it within the scope of the spectrum, because you can counterbalance it with these other things and get the nuance of how things evolved. But when you hold it up, like if you were just to go, oh yeah, Batman is directly attributable to the Scarlet Pimpernel, I don't feel like that's an accurate statement, and I think it diminishes the rich history and evolution of these things. Okay, I've really gone off the deep end on this one. Maybe I'll wrap up my thoughts on the Scarlet Pimpernel in the next episode. I promise I won't go into a history lesson about it. Let's see if Dante is going to find the source of this noise on the other side of the wall, shall we? Meet me here tomorrow for more of the Count of Monte Cristo. Okay, goodbye. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.